There is a kind of silence that is not the same as having nothing to say. It is the silence of someone who has something so large inside them that they have decided the world is not ready to hold it, and that they are not ready to watch the world try. Riley lived inside that silence for 7 years. She went to work. She paid her bills. She laughed at the things people laughed at. And the entire time she was carrying a memory that would not fit in any ordinary afternoon. She had died on a summer evening in 2011, on the edge of a lake in the United States, when the doors of an ambulance closed around her and her heart stopped. And then she had come back, not the way people mean when they say someone pulled through, but the way you come back from a country no one around you has visited, carrying its weather on your skin. For 7 years she told almost no one, not because she doubted it, the opposite. She was more certain of those minutes than of anything that had happened to her before or since. It felt more real than this life, she would eventually say, and that was exactly the problem. How do you explain to the people who love you that the most real thing that ever happened to you happened while you were, by every clinical measure, gone? So she kept it. She let it sit inside her like a stone she had swallowed and learned to breathe around. And the people closest to her went on believing they knew her, while the most important fact of her life stayed sealed behind her teeth. When she finally began to speak, she did not start with the lake. She started with the sentence. Because the thing she could not stop hearing, the line that had followed her through 7 years of ordinary mornings, was not a description of light or peace or the gates she would later try to describe. It was a single, almost unbearable accusation, spoken to her by a being she could only call love itself. You missed the boat. 4 words. Said gently, she insisted, without cruelty, without rejection. But they had landed in her like a hook, and they had never let go. This is the story of Riley. It is the story of a woman who drowned on dry land in front of her friends, who existed in 2 places at once, who watched every person she had ever loved come flooding back to her in a single instant, and who was sent home from a country of impossible color with one instruction she did not fully understand. We are going to tell it backward. We will begin where she begins, with the woman who came home different, and we will move, step by step, against the current, past the years of silence, past the verdict, past the gates and the animals, past the flood of faces, past the closing doors of the ambulance, until we arrive at the very end, at the most ordinary moment of all. A young woman on a lake at the end of a summer day, with the sun on the water and 2 friends nearby, who had no idea that the next few minutes would end her life and remake it. This is NDE Cosmic Legacy. Stay with us. We are going to walk her home in reverse. The woman who eventually broke her silence was not, by her own account, the woman who had gone into that lake. Something fundamental had been rearranged in her, and the rearrangement did not fade with time, the way a vivid dream loses its grip by lunch. If anything, it deepened. The further she got from the event, the more clearly she could feel that she had been issued a new set of senses, and that there was no returning the old ones. Before the accident, she had no particular relationship with faith. In her own description, she was confused and undecided, not hostile to religion, not drawn to it, simply standing in the wide, neutral middle, where a great many people stand and never expect to leave. She was young. She assumed there was time to figure all of that out later, the way one assumes there will be time for most things. Then she came back, and the figuring out was no longer optional. Within months of her release from the hospital, she had undergone what she could only call a complete conversion, not a slow drift toward belief, but a turning so total that she described herself years later with a phrase that was almost a joke about how far she had traveled. "A big God girl now," she said. The woman who had been undecided had become, without negotiation, someone for whom the question was permanently settled. But the change was not only a change of belief. It was a change of perception, and this was the part that was harder to explain to anyone. She had come back, able to feel things she had no business feeling. She could sense the pain in other people. Not guess at it, not read it from their faces. Feel it, the way you feel a draft from an open door behind you. She would be standing near a stranger and become aware of a grief or a burden the stranger was carrying. As though it were giving off a temperature, she began to have dreams that were too specific, too forward-pointing, to be filed comfortably under coincidence. The boundary between her and the world, the membrane that keeps most of us politely separate, had been thinned. She did not advertise any of this. A woman who tells people she can feel their pain is a woman who gets looked at a certain way. So she added it to the silence. She carried the gifts the way she carried the memory. Privately, carefully, like something that might spill. And underneath all of it was the verdict she could not unhear. She had come back knowing that she had been told, in the clearest possible terms, that her life, back there, had been about something she had missed. She had been sent home with work to do and a warning attached. "You must stay awake," the voice had said. "If you don't, the cards will lay where they lay." So she stayed awake. That was the shape her new life took. Whatever else changed, the faith, the sensitivity, the dreams, the spine of it was that instruction. She lived as a woman who had been given back her own life on a condition, and who had decided to honor the condition even when she could not fully explain it, even to herself. That is the woman who finally spoke. To understand her, we have to go back further, to the 5 hours that came before the silence, and to the threshold she was sent back across. Before the new senses, before the conversion, before the 7 years of holding it in, there was the return itself. And the return was not gentle. People imagine that coming back from death must be a kind of relief, a soft landing into the arms of the living. For Riley, it was the opposite. The country she had just left was made of peace beyond description. The body she came back to was made of pain. She returned to a flatlined heart restarted, to lungs that had filled, to internal injuries that had not waited for her while she was gone. And then, by her account, she endured roughly 5 hours of agony with no analgesia, no sedation, and no answers. 5 hours awake inside a body that had every reason to have stopped. She did not describe it as heroic. She described it as what it was, long and conscious, and almost without mercy. What carried her through those hours was not the absence of pain, but the presence of something underneath it. She had come back with a knowledge she had not had before. The knowledge that the pain was not the largest thing in the room, even when it felt like the only thing. She had just been somewhere where pain did not exist, and the memory of that place was fresh enough to function as a kind of anchor. She knew, the way you know the floor is still there in the dark, that the agony was temporary, and that what she had seen was not, because she had not simply been revived. She had been sent. The distinction mattered enormously to her, and she returned to it again and again when she finally told the story. That moment wasn't just a return to life, she said. It was a commission. A commission is not the same as a reprieve. A reprieve says, "You may go." A commission says, "You may go, and here is what you are to do." She had been told, in the encounter she was racing back from, that she had impacted enough of the lives around her that she would be allowed to return, but that the return came with terms. She was to stay awake. She was not to drift back into the wide, neutral middle she had been standing in before, and if she did, if she fell back asleep to the thing she had been shown, then, in the voice's own phrasing, the cards would lay where they lay. She understood this not as a threat, but as a description of how things work. She had been let back into her own life the way you are let back into a house you nearly lost, grateful and aware that the lock had been changed. There was something else she brought back from the threshold, and it softened the whole of it. She did not return racked with guilt. She returned, she said, by grace, not by punishment. The being who had named her failure had not cast her out for it. It had sent her home to try again. The same voice that said you missed the boat had also said, in effect, there is still time to catch it. That combination, the unflinching verdict and the unearned second chance, was the thing she would spend the next 7 years unable to put into a sentence small enough for an ordinary conversation. To understand the commission, we have to go back to the moment it was given. We have to go back to the encounter, to the sunset that was not a sunset, and to the 4 words that followed her home. The encounter is the center of everything, and Riley always approached it carefully, the way you approach a thing you are afraid of getting wrong by describing it too quickly. She had risen, and we will come in a moment to what rising meant, through a country of color and sound and adoration, and she had arrived at last at something her language was not built to carry. She tried anyway. She said it began as light. The most beautiful sunset I have ever seen, she called it. A horizon of warmth coming toward her, gold deepening into a brightness that did not hurt to look at. And then, inside the light, there was a shape. A silhouette, she said. The outline of a man, made entirely of light, standing at the center of the warmth as though the sunset had organized itself around a person. She knew who it was without being told. He didn't have to say his name, she said. He was the name. What followed was not a conversation in the way we have conversations. The words did not arrive through the air. They arrived inside her, placed directly into her awareness, complete and unmistakable. And the first thing the light said to her was the thing she would never stop hearing. Love is a choice. I am love. And that life back there, it was about me. And you didn't choose me. You missed the boat. She received it whole, in an instant, and she understood every layer of it at once. It was not a rejection. This was the part she insisted on, every time. The voice was not angry. It was not casting her out. It was simply telling her the truth. That the thing her life had been about, the thing underneath all the other things, was love. And that love was not a feeling that happened to you, but a choice you made, over and over. And that she had spent her years standing in the neutral middle without ever making it. You missed the boat. For a woman who had just drowned, the image was almost unbearable in its precision. She had spent her last conscious minutes on dry land, choking on water that had no business being in her lungs. And now the being of light was telling her gently that she had missed a different kind of crossing entirely. The cruelty would have been obvious if there had been any cruelty in it. There was none. There was only the clarity of being shown all at once, the shape of a life she had not realized she was living. Then the light said the second thing. You've impacted enough of my people, it told her. So I'll let you go back, but you must stay awake. If you don't, the cards will lay where they lay. And a third sentence, quieter, almost tender in how impossible it made everything. You'll never be able to be perfect. That last line undid her more than the verdict had. She had just been told she had missed the most important thing, and in nearly the same breath she had been told that perfection was never going to be the price of admission. The two truths sat together without contradiction. She had failed, and she was loved. She had missed the boat, and she was being sent back to the dock. The voice that named her shortfall was the same voice that refused to require her to be flawless. She felt, near the being, a threshold, a boundary she understood without being shown a line. Beyond it, the radiance grew even greater, and she knew with total certainty that to cross it would be to stay. She did not cross. She was turned, gently, back toward the life she had come from. She wept. She did not want to leave the warmth. But she went, because she had been given a commission and a condition and an impossible, freeing piece of news, that she would never be perfect, and that it had never been the point. To understand why the encounter wrecked her and remade her, we have to go back to what she passed through to reach it. We have to go back to the gates. Before the light took the shape of a man, there was a place. Riley resisted the word heaven at first, not because she doubted it, but because she felt the word had been worn smooth by overuse. That people heard it and pictured clouds and harps and stopped paying attention. What she had seen was nothing so tame. It was a country, vast and structured and alive, and she spent years trying to describe it without flattening it into a postcard. There were gates. Not a single pearly arch, but gates beyond counting, stretching further than she could follow, made of materials she had no names for. Gold, yes, but also pearl, and an iridescence that shifted as she looked at it, and gemstones in colors that simply do not exist in the world she came back to. She was emphatic about this. The colors were not brighter versions of earthly colors. They were colors outside the spectrum she had been issued at birth, and trying to recall them was like trying to remember a word in a language she had only ever heard once. And there was sound. Music, she said, played on instruments she had never heard, arranged in harmonies she could not have invented. And all of it was praise. The whole country was singing, and the singing was not performance. It was the natural condition of the place, the way silence is the natural condition of an empty room. Everything that existed there was, in some way she felt, rather than analyzed, in a state of adoration. This was the detail that stayed with her in the most unexpected way, the one she returned to when she wanted to convey how unlike her expectations the place had been. The animals were there, and they were worshipping too. Not as pets arranged decoratively at someone's feet, but as full participants, joining the people and the land and the music in the same harmony of praise, equal voices in the same enormous song. She had not expected that. Nothing in her undecided, neutral, pre-accident life had prepared her for a heaven in which a creature she had loved on earth might be standing in the same chord as the people she had loved. The country was not still. This was another thing she wanted understood. It was not a static painting of paradise, frozen and serene. It was vibrant, full of motion and direction and purpose. A place that was doing something, going somewhere, alive in every direction at once. And underneath all the color and sound and movement was a feeling she could only describe as recognition. It felt like home, she said, like the original home I forgot I came from. Not a new and dazzling place she was visiting for the first time, but a place she had somehow always belonged to and had simply lost the memory of. The homesickness people feel for childhood houses, for grandmother's kitchens, for summers that are gone. She understood, standing at the gates, that all of that homesickness had been pointing here the entire time. Earth had been the unfamiliar country. This was the one she was from. But she did not arrive at the gates by floating through clouds. The way she got there was stranger than that, and more beautiful. And to understand it, we have to go back to the flood. To the moment when every person she had ever loved came back to her at once. Before the gates, before the colors with no names, there was the review of her life. And it was not the review most people imagine. Riley had heard, as most of us have, the cliché of the life flashing before the eyes, a rapid film of one's own deeds, played back for judgment. What happened to her was not a film, and it was not about her deeds. It was about people, and it did not flash. It flooded. Every soul who had ever left a mark on hers came back to her at once. Not in sequence, not one face after another like a slideshow, but all together, in a single overwhelming arrival. Every soul that left a mark on mine came flooding back, she said. People she had loved, people she had forgotten she had loved, people who had died long before, and people she had not thought about in decades, and people from so early in her life that she should not have been able to remember them at all. And here is the detail that made the experience unlike anything she could compare it to. She did not simply see their faces. She remembered them with every sense at once. She remembered the smell of them. She remembered the exact sound of their voices. Not the idea of the voice, but the voice itself, the specific grain of it. She remembered the weight of a hand, the particular way a person had laughed, the things that the conscious mind files away as too small to keep. Grandparents long gone, childhood friends she had lost touch with, souls who had passed out of her life so completely that their names had gone soft at the edges. And now here they all were, present in full, every sensory detail of them restored as though no time had passed and nothing had ever been forgotten. It was, she understood, the truest accounting of a life that could be made. Not a tally of accomplishments, not a ledger of sins. A gathering of everyone who had ever mattered to her, and everyone to whom she had ever mattered. The whole web of human connection that a life actually consists of, made visible all at once. The review was not asking her what she had achieved. It was showing her what she had been part of. It was showing her love, in the form of all the particular people through whom love had reached her. And as the faces flooded in, something else came with them. She began to rise, but she was careful, always, to correct the image people formed when she said that word. She did not rise through space. She did not float upward through clouds toward a destination in the sky. I was rising in understanding, she said. The ascent was not physical. It was an ascent of comprehension, knowledge unfolding into her, layer after layer, as the veil between what she had known and what was true was slowly lifted. And some of what she understood was hard. As she rose, she was shown the impact of her own death on the people she was leaving behind. She saw her father turning toward unhealthy ways of coping with the loss of her. She saw a sister and a brother set spiritually adrift in their grief. The understanding was not abstract. It included the cost, the specific weight her absence would lay on the specific people who loved her. She was being shown, in the same motion, both how loved she was and how much her leaving would wound. That rising in understanding carried her toward the gates and then toward the light. But it began somewhere. At the moment, her spirit came loose from her body. And that moment, too, was unlike anything she had heard described. To understand it, we have to go back to the doors of the ambulance. Before the rising, before the flood of faces, there was the leaving of the body. And the leaving had a precise location in the physical world. The back of an ambulance, at the moment the doors swung shut. That was when her heart stopped. That was the threshold between the two halves of the story, the lake on one side, the country of light on the other, and it was marked, with almost unbearable neatness, by the sound of two doors closing. She had been carried from the shore in a body that was no longer working, and as the ambulance doors sealed, the part of her that was Riley came loose and rose free of the form on the stretcher. There was no pain in it. There was no panic. The terror that should have accompanied dying simply was not present. Instead, there was clarity, a calm, complete, fully awake consciousness, more lucid than ordinary waking life, watching the scene from just outside the body it had lived in. And then came the detail that she could never quite get anyone to grasp, because it broke the rules people assume the soul must follow. She existed in two places at once. Her spirit was rising, calm and clear and unafraid. And at the very same time, she could hear her own physical body. She could hear it gasping. She could hear it crying out, fighting for the air it could not pull in, laboring in its distress on the stretcher below. She was the calm thing ascending, and she was aware of the panicked thing she had left, both at once, neither one canceling the other. It was not frightening, she said. That was the strangest part. To hear your own body struggling to live while you float free of it ought to be a horror, and it was not. The piece of the part that had risen was large enough to hold the distress of the part that remained. She listened to her own dying the way you might listen to weather against a window from inside a warm room, aware of it, unharmed by it, already somewhere else. This dual awareness became, for her, one of the proofs she carried. Not proof for anyone else. She knew it could never function that way, but proof for herself. She had not dreamed a peaceful exit and edited out the ugliness afterward. She had been present for both the peace and the struggle simultaneously, and the memory of holding both at once was too specific, too strange, to be the invention of an oxygen-starved brain composing a comforting story. She had been in two places. She knew it the way she knew her own name. Later, the people who had worked on her would confirm the outline of the timeline, how long she had been unresponsive, the events she should not have been able to track. The account checked out, as much as such an account can. But for Riley, the verification was almost beside the point. She had been there. She had heard herself leave. And before the doors closed, before the ambulance, before any of it, there was the lake. There was the most ordinary evening of her life, and the few minutes that ended it. We have walked her all the way back. We have one moment left. So here, at the end, is the beginning. A lake somewhere in the United States. The summer of 2011. The light going long and gold across the water the way it does at the close of a warm day. Around 7 in the evening. There was no party. There was no recklessness, no stunt, no dare. There was only a young woman, the sun, 2 friends, and the water. The last ordinary minutes of a life she did not yet know was about to change. They had been out on the jet ski. They had fallen off it before, the way everyone does, and laughed about it, the way everyone does. It was the last ride of the day. She was climbing back on, still standing, when the machine surged forward beneath her. No collision, no other boat, nothing dramatic to point to afterward. Just the sudden violence of water and force meeting a body in exactly the wrong way. It gutted her. That was her word, and we will let it stand on its own, because it is honest, and because the camera will look away from the rest. The pressure tore her internally. She saw what was happening in the water around her, and she understood, with a terrible calm, that she was badly hurt. Her friends got her back to the shore. Someone had already called for help, having heard the screams. They laid her on a picnic table by the edge of the lake, and she began, slowly, to suffocate, the injuries closing off the air, her lungs unable to fill. And then the strangest grace of the whole evening arrived, before any light, before any gates. Lying on a picnic table while the people around her dissolved into panic, Riley felt a heavy calm come down over her. Time slowed, just for her. She watched the fear on the faces around her as though from a small distance, and she was not afraid. "I didn't feel fear," she said. She made her peace with dying on a wooden table by a lake while the sun finished setting, and the peace was real, and it held. Then the ambulance came, and the doors closed, and you already know what happened next, because we began there, with the woman who came home from the country of light, carrying a sentence she could not say out loud for 7 years. That is the whole arc of it. A girl on the water, who did not choose anything in particular, told by love itself that choosing was the entire point. Sent back to a picnic table, to a stretcher, to 5 hours of pain, to a silence, and finally to a microphone. We have walked her all the way home in reverse. Now we end where she ended. Not at the lake, but at the lantern.
This is NDE Cosmic Legacy, and every week we tell one story like Riley's, one account, drawn from the public record, of a person who stood at the edge of their own death and came back with something they could not stop carrying. We do not tell you what to believe about these stories. We tell them as faithfully as we can, in the words of the people who lived them, and we leave the meaning where it belongs, with you. Riley waited 7 years to say any of this out loud. 7 years of ordinary mornings with an extraordinary thing locked behind her teeth. And the reason she finally spoke was not that the memory had faded enough to be safe. It was that she came to believe the memory was not only hers, that a thing shown to one person on a picnic table by a lake might be meant, somehow, to reach a stranger who needed it. That is why she broke the silence. And it is the only reason this channel exists. So before you go, a few small things. and each of them matters more than it looks. Leave a like, not for us. Leave it for the next person the algorithm has to decide whether to show this to. The person who is sitting in a hospital waiting room tonight, or lying awake afraid of dying, or carrying their own silence about something they have never been able to say. Your like is a small lantern. It tells the dark where to send the light. Subscribe and turn on the bell if you would like to be here when the next one arrives. Next week, we sit with another voice, another person who crossed over and came back changed, and we would be glad to have you in the room. The bell is how you make sure you are there, and then leave us one thing in the comments below, not a paragraph, not an argument, one name, the name of a single soul who left a mark on yours, someone living or someone gone, someone you would want to come flooding back to you the way they all came flooding back to Riley. Just the name. No explanation. Riley's entire life review is made of people like that. Tonight, name one of yours. Last of all, share this. Send it to one person you know is carrying something heavy right now. One person who is sitting beside a bed, or grieving quietly, or standing in the wide neutral middle, undecided, the way Riley once stood. You do not have to say anything. Just pass it along. That is how the lantern keeps moving from hand to hand. Not because anyone forces it, but because someone, somewhere, decided not to keep the light to themselves. Riley was told, in the warmth of a light she called by the name of love, that she had missed the boat, and then she was told that she was being sent back to the dock anyway. Not because she had earned it, not because she had become perfect, but because she never would be perfect, and it had never been the point. Love is a choice, the light told her. Not a feeling that arrives on its own. A choice, made on ordinary evenings on dry land before any of us know how little time we are promised. She is awake now. That was the whole assignment. Stay awake. So stay awake with her tonight. Light your lantern and pass it to whoever you know is sitting beside a bed. Choose love while it is still a choice you get to make. We will see you next week.